Hi, everyone. I'm Pete Christensen,
I'm Coffee Brown.
and welcome to episode 39 of
Don't Die Dumb.
Now, we have a variety of topics to talk to today, but we're going to start narrowing that down because I feel we're a little too broad and we're not gaining the proper audience we should. But of course, as always, send me emails, let me know what you think. Send me text, that'd be fine too, whatever.
Yeah, what would you like us to talk about? Speaking for myself, I like to go chase down homework on science stories and medicine stories and technology a lot of times too. But let us know what you're interested in so we can tailor this more to your interests.
And I myself, as you know from watching me, I don't do any research at all. I just make stuff up and hope that and pray that you'll believe it.
Welcome to the 21st century, the post-truth generation.
I think we're also going to do this. When we talk politics, and politics permeates everything nowadays, and that's why we bring it up. I don't mean to bring it up too often. But when we do, I think we're going to get right to the facts and move on. And I want to talk very briefly about the UFC trailer court, and that's a cruel thing to say. The UFC fight on the White House lawn. I feel it's because the president had a 60% approval rate from young men, I think it was 17 to 35. And now he's 13% underwater with them. They've abandoned him, mainly because they can't find jobs. Everything's expensive. When they go out to look for a job, they're paying $4.50 a gallon of gas, maybe $3.50. It's lowered to that, and they want us to think that's a big deal.
It's $2 a gallon everywhere.
Yeah, right.
That's what the president said.
Telling us, yeah.
It's all over the place.
So this is an attempt to get back those voters. Now, whether it'll work or not, I don't know, but
You know, along those lines, it came up in a conversation between me and someone else. A man is not the opposite of a woman. A man is the opposite of a child. Think that one through. You young men who want to grow up to be real men, you young men in your early adulthood looking for careers, looking for purpose, looking for your path in life, you're not going to find it with action figures and comic books and UFC fights. You're going to have to actually look for some grown-up stuff to think about. Start now.
Okay, speaking of grown-up stuff, I want to talk about robust planning. And in its simplest form, and you correct me on this, please, I've always thought that meant simply having a plan B. There's got to be more to it than that, right?
So there are a few steps to it. When you make a plan, you make it because you hope you'll get a certain outcome. But we all know that no plan survives contact with the enemy, in this case, real life. In every case, real life. And so what you want to do is say, if my plan doesn't work, how will I know it's not working? And how will I decide whether to double down on the plan, modify the plan, or abandon it in favor of something else? So you want to have ahead of time, this is the time and this is the manner that I'm going to check my plan. So ideologues on both the right and the left, this is not a right or left thing, this is a human thing. We overbet on what we think will work. I've talked a lot of times about a living wage. Mm-hmm. If we go to a living wage, which I predict is going to be a good idea, we're going to have a plan to manage a wage price spiral, or we're going to have 1930s style German inflation. So there is a bomb hidden even in my favorite plan, which is a living wage, and we have to prepare ahead of time for that.
Well, then, let me interject here. The problem with a living wage, not a minimum wage, but a living wage, is that it can increase the inflationary spiral. Has any nation ever stopped the inflationary spiral?
There are ways to do it, and they all come with price tags. And this is something I would want to consult with experts on. I mean, lucky for all of us, I don't make policy for the country. But, for example, you can look at wage price controls for a while. Or we could have controls on the amount of profit people can make, profiteering. Or we could limit the span of wages within a company. So in most parts of the world, the CEO and the janitor don't differ by more than 10 or 20 fold. But in the US, that can easily be 1,000 fold. So there are ways you can get at it, but all of them involve putting your finger on the scales. Adam Smith did say that government would have to put its hand on the tiller even in a free market economy. He didn't mean absolute free market economy. He's always been quoted as being this supporter of laissez-faire. He was not. He understood very well that you have to step in from time to time. He just thought it should be done sparingly.
Well, now, you're talking about robust planning, and wouldn't the majority of people say, well, of course, you always think, if I'm going to build an awning for the porch, and I'm going to build it out of wood, I got to think to myself, okay, do I need to put shade cloth over that? Or, don't all people have a contingency plan?
God, no. Most people imagine things are going to turn out the way they intend for them to turn out. Mm-hmm. And nobody more so than ideologues. And of course, policy is usually made by ideologues. It's not usually made by pragmatic, humble people who are trying to get the best outcome. It's made by people who want to prove a point or win for their team or something like that.
So explain a little further about robust planning. Why is this important?
So again, my background is medicine, and what I teach my students is every treatment that you do to a patient can harm them. Sorry if that alarms you, but it is the case. Every single medical treatment has some potential for harm. If I give you fluid, I might fluid overload your heart. In fact, we used to actually give fluid before we had better approaches until we heard some gurgling in the lungs. You can actually drown people in their own lungs by giving them too much fluid. So when we'd start to hear that sound, we'd go, okay, that's as much fluid as they can have. Everything that we do for a patient has some possibility of making them worse rather than better. And to be a good clinician, before you begin your treatment, you say, if I harm them, what will it look like? And if that happens, how will I fix it? And then you make sure you have what you need right there. For example, whenever I give a medicine, I know there's a chance of an allergic reaction. So I always have my anaphylaxis kit right there. I literally touch it with my right hand before I give the medicine. If you're going to intubate somebody, there's always a chance that you can't get the airway in for one reason or another. So you always have a surgical airway, a way to actually cut into the neck right there. Nowadays, that is extremely rare. Don't worry that it's going to happen to you. It's super rare anymore. We have really good tools now. But being prepared for that rare event means that if it happens, your patient doesn't die while you're looking around for how to fix it. You already had a plan for fixing it. And if I have to go to plan B, I'm already writing plan C in my head in case plan B also blows up. That's robust planning.
Now, the problem I have with that is it's planning by committee. When you have a plan, I'll give you an example. I worked for a television station, and I said, for a promotion, we should have hot air balloons. And of course, somebody said, well, what if there's some kind of accident? And I said, well, we're going to tether them. Well, yeah, well, what if someone falls out? Well, we have insurance to cover that. Well, yeah, what if he dies, though? We'll still get sued in civil court. Until they shoot down everything, anything you can think of. Robust planning, isn't it just negative planning?
No. Robust planning doesn't actually itself entail whether it's a committee or an individual doing the planning. But what you're talking about, I call the yeah, but problem. So, and the other way I think of it is putting a liter of Jell-O into a 1-pint crate. Wherever you push down on the Jell-O, you can make it flat, but it's just going to bulge out somewhere else. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter what you do. Some bulges are more tolerable than others. But in every system, there are always trade-offs. And in policy discussions, we get to the point where we go, hey, let's have school lunches, and then kids won't grow up with brain damage from malnutrition, and we can give them a better education, and they'll be better citizens in the future. All of which is true. And then somebody else goes, yeah, but then I can't sell Fritos in the hallway. Or then I can't, or then my taxes will be higher. They won't, they'll be lower because there'll be fewer people on welfare later. But the point is, people always come with a yeah, but. And then the answer is not to come up with a plan where there's no yeah, but. The answer is to figure out which of the yeah, buts you can live with. Would you rather live with Coca-Cola and Fritos not being able to sell junk food at schools? Or would you rather live with the 20-somethings who take over the world from you in your old age being incompetent?
Now, off camera, we were talking, and I said, well, Nikola Tesla, who I think I'm an expert on, invented the drone with the idea, he said this, that there would be bloodless wars. Now, we could have drone attacks on infrastructure, and finally one country would say to the other one, I've had enough, we have to rebuild. The war's over, we surrender. And they would be bloodless, they wouldn't kill people. But what happened was, of course, leaders attacked school buildings with 168 children in them, or other places. Now, you have a similar tale about Albert Nobel, who has been vilified because he's the namesake for the Nobel Peace Prize, but he sold dynamite, as far as I knew, to warring nations.
Yeah, so Alfred Nobel invented dynamite as a way of stabilizing nitroglycerin. Dynamite is basically clay impregnated with nitroglycerin. The problem with nitroglycerin, and if you ever watch old westerns, this shows up a lot, is that if you shake a bottle of this stuff, it can blow up on you. So you have these people in a stagecoach transporting nitroglycerin across the Old West, and it's in this suspension of springs and stuff to keep it from getting jarred and exploding. A lot of people died that way. Alfred Nobel figured out that if you soak clay in nitroglycerin instead of water, you make these sticks that are very, very stable. You can hit them with a hammer, you can put them in your campfire, and nothing will happen. You actually need a blasting cap to strike them hard enough that they'll blow up. That's why blasting caps were a thing. There used to be all these ads, remember, when we were kids. Don't pick this up if you see it, because it'll blow your hand off. And by the way, a guy at my school got his hand blown off that way.
Wow.
Right, so it's real.
Fond childhood memories. Go ahead.
So he did this to make people safer. But, of course, the first thing folks did was turn it into a weapon.
Yeah.
And it was his chagrin at having accidentally become a weapons dealer that made Alfred Nobel create the Nobel Prize. He was trying to make up for the harm that he had inadvertently done.
I'm better educated now. See how this works? This is great. We talked about the inflationary spiral. And what it seems to be is that if you could stop the prices on homes and vehicles, wouldn't that bring everything else down? I mean, if you're going to have a freeze on prices, isn't that where you would start?
It's a good place to start, but there are other places that, I mean, inflation can occur anywhere. We saw how chicken eggs got expensive. That, by the way, was neither Biden's nor Trump's fault. That was because we had bird flu. All the finger pointing was just theater. We're having bumps in energy prices right now, partly because of a war we could have just didn't have any particular reason to get into, but also partly because the data centers are increasing energy consumption, not by a lot, only by about less than 3% presently, and 3 to 6% over the next 10 or 20 years. But it's enough to nudge energy prices upward, especially in some communities. And one of the mistakes that we make is we assume what's happening in my community represents the world.
Yeah.
For example, El Nino is going to make this summer one of another hottest on record.
Yeah.
But it could actually make Albuquerque cooler this summer than average. So if you're in Albuquerque, you're going, what heat wave? What climate change, right? I remember a congressman taking a snowball he'd kept in his freezer until summer, and he walked in and waved this snowball around in the Congress and said, look, there's no climate change, it just pains me that anybody that stupid would ever have gotten a driver's license, let alone a public office, but there you are. So we can overgeneralize from our own local environment, but if you're in, say, Añadonia, energy prices are definitely going up if the Jupiter project is built there. So is the local temperature.
One of the problems with the Jupiter project and these AI centers is how much water they consume. Could you think of a worse place to put them? As in the desert Southwest?
Right, right.
Why not put them in the Southeast where they're having constant flooding now?
In the Southeast or in a cold part of the country, further up north where it's harder to grow crops. This could be, but for example, if I were in Russia, I'd think Siberia is a great place for data centers because it'll, bleed off some of the cold. It'll cool it down better without doing harm. It could even help to create local improved environments.
Now, don't we have a gold mine in the Great Lakes? The elder Bush tried to establish that because there's so much fresh water as a means to fight the petrodollars that we're still slaves to. And people will say, well, yeah, we have more oil than anywhere else. Yeah, but we sell it abroad. We don't sell it here.
While we're importing oil.
Yeah. So he tried to make the Great Lakes water a standard. Couldn't do it. The states were fighting each other with. So then he came up with NAFTA. Okay, maybe they have all the oil, but we have all the wheat. He combined it with Mexico and Canada, the NAFTA project. The only problem they had was Mexico's government was so corrupt they were selling it under the table and undermined his plan. It was a good plan, actually. And NAFTA brought us in, before NAFTA, we brought in 19 million a year. After NAFTA, we brought in 19 billion a year. It was a tremendous success. Since then, we've renamed it, same program, under a different administration's name. But the point is, Wisconsin has tankers that are filled with fresh water and they take them to Florida and sell it. Rather than doing this, shouldn't we be purifying the water from our rivers so we can drink that? Florida's got water.
Depending on where you are in the country, there isn't necessarily enough water in the rivers. The Rio Grande hasn't had flowing water for a long time.
Yeah, it doesn't even make it to Mexico.
When I was a child, the Colorado River, where it emptied into Mexico, was such a rushing rapids that it was considered one of the most dangerous outdoor adventures. Now, it looks like the Rio Grande. Mexico is pissed because water from the Colorado isn't reaching them.
Yeah.
Because we just draw it all off. I have wondered about transcontinental pipelines and stuff so that areas that are prone to flooding could bleed water off into areas that are prone to drought. But I will tell you that this is the kind of plan that's full of unforeseen consequences. I think it's worth exploring, but if I had carte blanche, I wouldn't build it tomorrow. I would do some homework first.
In Africa, because of climate change, they have terrible, terrible droughts. And they do get the monsoonal rains, but when they get them, they're violent. And the ground is so parched, it can't control it. So it's either flooding or starvation droughts. Wouldn't it be a good idea to take some of these billions and billions of dollars we're investing in wars to build reservoirs there? And I hear people saying, when I told people, you can build a pipeline, we've got a 1,500-mile pipeline pushing oil in Alaska. Why don't we build a pipeline to the Mississippi that floods like clockwork every 7 years out to the west? They said a pipeline could never handle that water. Doesn't have it.
No, that's not true. They absolutely could, and there are some giant pipelines in the country already. So it's already been done technologically. The notion of spending billions of dollars on that. Well, reservoirs are great. They save lives. Yeah. They rehabilitate they allow farmland to be farmland. They provide recreation. You can raise fish in them. But I wouldn't spend billions on pipelines until we finish building golden ballrooms.
Okay,
I think it's a priority thing.
Now, we were talking about the rivers and the waters in this nation, and the fact that the East Coast is flooding and tornadoes constantly. What is it going to take for people to believe the scientists, the climatologists, the meteorologists, who've all told us for now 50 years that climate change is real?
Actually, 150 years. Mm-hmm. About the time of Lincoln's assassination, people began reporting that climate change would occur as industrialization drove up the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's how much warning we've had. Most people date climate change to the mid-70s, the famous hockey stick graph.
Yeah.
That graph wasn't when we discovered this effect. That graph is when it accelerated noticeably, when we saw a sharp bend in the... So the temperatures were already increasing, but they began increasing faster. That's called an inflection point on a graph, and it's often the most important thing to look at on a graph. That was in the mid-70s. So we've had more than 50 years of the acceleration of climate change, but more than 150 years of awareness of climate change. And of course, you guys all know it's hotter every summer. And the winters, we get less and less snow and less water from the mountains and so forth. So I really am impressed. I'm genuinely impressed at the people who can go, there's no climate change, because I wish I had that ability.
But the question was, what's it going to take to get people to admit it?
Nothing. If you can look at this and deny climate change, you can look at I'm sorry, you could look at this image and deny that there's two guys on the screen.
Will it take a consortium of American leaders to step forward, congressmen and senate together, saying, yeah, this is real, we have to do something? Or will it take catastrophe after catastrophe?
Catastrophe after catastrophe.
Farmers will, right now, this is an interesting thing. Farmers are still in big support of the administration, who are climate deniers, that is killing the farms.
So this problem is actually solved. Trump got rid of the department that monitors climate, and he got rid of the department that monitors oceans. If you don't see it, it's not there.
Yeah. Well, it's hard for two reasons. I don't want to get political again. We made our point. But it's hard to admit when you've been conned. I've gone to the carnival as a kid, got ripped off, and didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't want to admit that. And also, ignorance is bliss. It's nice to say, well, I can go up to the mountains where it's nice and cool. And the thing I constantly hear, we've always had cycles in the weather. It's always been here.
Now we're on my turf. This one comes down to science, not politics. So walk to the wall of your room and stop yourself by putting your hands up like that. It's all right. Now do that at 150 miles an hour. We've had climate changes in the past, but this is orders of magnitude faster than the fossil record. Also, we've had mass extinctions in the past. The next one is us.
Do you feel confident on that?
That we're headed for mass extinction?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And honestly, the world will be better off without us. But if you're someone who thinks the world ought to have humans in it, then being thoughtful would be a good step in the right direction.
It's my theory that this is a time in history, and it happened once before after the stock market crash of the 1920s, when the wealth of the nation was held in the hands of 12 families.
As it is now.
And they tried to take over America. It's my theory that the wealthy are trying to take over America again. And with this odd assumption put forth by Elon Musk that we can populate Mars and they can all move there. There will be orbiting hotels, luxury hotels. Of course, you're not going unless you're a millionaire watching this, that will orbit the Earth within 6 years. But the fact that you could have a sustainable planet that is unsustainable at this point, I think that the wealthy people are thinking they can do that.
So, we all grew up with space colony science fiction stories and Moon 1999 and things like that.
Flash Gordon,
and the notion of colonizing Mars is so appealing and so forth. Don't take my word for this. Look up, we're all on ChatGPT now. Just go to ChatGPT and say, what are the obstacles to colonizing Mars? And you'll realize we are nowhere near overcoming those obstacles. Even in the space hotels. Yeah, if I had infinite money and didn't care about other people, I would love to go up and stay in a space hotel for a couple of weeks. That is very different than colonizing the moon or Mars. The differences in gravity create monster health effects for us. The cosmic rays we can't fully shield against, so cancer would be a near guarantee. You'd age at a different rate than your relatives on Earth. That'll start to add up over a period of years. The long periods of time in space, and the problem of getting adequate nutrition when there's only a few things you can grow and you can't grow very much of them. The list is quite long, but the number of obstacles we have to overcome to get from here to there is absolutely enormous. There's a great series of books by Stanley Robinson, called Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars. And it's a very worked out speculation of what it would take to colonize Mars. But this was back in the 70s. And what we've learned from the space stations is that life in space is very unhealthy for human beings. Even if we could colonize the moon and Mars, that's not going to happen. Even if we avoid catastrophe, that will not happen this century. But even if we could do all those things, it is not an answer to overpopulation on Earth, because the energy it would take to move me from here to Mars is greater than the energy I would have consumed by living out a full lifetime on Earth.
We only have a few minutes left, so I want to discuss unity in America. What's it going to take to get us back to where we all work together for common goals? I think the major thing would be to get the two parties to stop fighting each other for the sake of parties.
My pitch would be, and this is going to sound liberal, sorry about that, I'm going to go full libtard on this one. As long as we think it's my clan versus other clans, by definition, we cannot get unity in this country. But if we're thinking, how can we have a country in which the most people get the most benefit, the most people can thrive, the fullest participation in the economy and the workforce, a country in which people are looking out for each other, that orientation will pull us toward each other even when we disagree about individual stuff. For example, I am not Jewish, but I care what happens to Jewish people, and therefore I have lots of Jewish friends. It doesn't matter that their fundamental core culture isn't my fundamental core culture. They're decent human beings. I care what happens to them, and they care what happens to me.
You've redefined the question.
You said, what would it take for us to come together?
Yes,
right?
and
we'd have to care about each other.
Yes, but what is it going to take to get us to where we care about each other? That's the question. How are we going to get a nation that has been torn apart and made to hate each other, not to hate each other anymore? I don't, by the way, I've said this many times and you've said it, I don't hate MAGA. I hate what they stand for, but I don't hate them. You know, they're good, hardworking people. They've just been sold a bill of goods.
So now I'm gonna pull a little bit in the other direction, despite all my unity talk just now. To be MAGA often means to be someone who will bring you iced tea and cookies, and then vote to put your child in a cage, have your family deported, and hobble your voting rights. But hey, they give you cookies and tea, so they're pretty nice people, and they'll help change your tire. It's not enough to be sweet and kind-hearted in ways that are stereotypical and make you feel good about yourself. We need to be kind to each other in ways that actually help each other.
Now, there was a reporter that wore a Make America Great Again red cap for a month. And he said at first it was great. All these people were throwing, hey, welcome, you know, it's good. I didn't know you felt like that. This is wonderful. And then as he got to know people better, first thing he noticed was one guy said, I'm glad you're here. You know, the blacks don't get any of this. And then a couple said, we're glad you stand with us, but you're not Jewish, are you? That all this hate started coming forward, you know. It's such a shame. If you are a MAGA member, why not try to understand minorities? Why not be nice to other religions? And one more thing I want to say, one more political thing. They have
We're doing a good job of avoiding politics today.
not
huh?
today, but the president wants to reward the rioters, the insurrectionists from January 6th. But originally, and he said this many times, it was all Antifa and BLM. Well, give them the money then, if you really mean that.
There you go, yeah.
I don't know. But anyhow, I would hope we'll get to a state of unity in this nation and soon, before it's too late, before we're torn apart. Remember, the Civil War almost ended with the nation being cut in half. And if that happens, you don't think we're vulnerable to other nations?
You know, there's an old Alaskan joke. If you cut Alaska in half, Texas would be the third largest state. If you tear America in half, we won't be one of the superpowers.
Exactly. So hopefully on a message of unity we'll end this week. Thank you so much for viewing. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week. I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
And remember,
Don't die dumb.